in the video age. So we're basically going to be dispelling what Charles Barkley just had to say, and that radio, who listens to that, right? Well, a lot of people do. And that's why you are all here. So we have two amazing panelists to help us talk about describing things on the radio. Chuck Cooperstein, the 2022 NSMA Texas Sportscaster of the Year, and the radio voice of the Dallas Mavericks. And Tim Roye, the radio voice of the Golden State Warriors. Also served as the voice of Stanford football this past year, and the California Sportscaster of the Year. So without further ado, I'll let both of these fine gentlemen make an opening statement, and then we'll get started with our panel.
I find the title of this very interesting because, to me, our job has really never changed. Our job is radio. Our job is to describe whether, are people watching? Are they watching with the sound turned down and us synced up? I hope they are, but I don't know how many of us actually take the time to do that. And if you're a technical Luddite like me, you definitely don't. You're just worried about your description. And to me, that's just, it's the essence of what we do. I don't think about television and video when I'm doing the game. I'm thinking about my listener. I'm thinking about how is my listener going to process what I am telling him or her. And to me, that's the bottom line of all this. It's about description, and then ultimately how you are describing it, with passion and purpose, enthusiasm, all those things that we absolutely have to have, and take that through. But to me, radio is radio. It's still the best broadcast medium as far as I'm concerned, and certainly for play-by-play guys, it is. So. That's the position that I come from.
Correct, Chuck.
Thank you, Tim.
What Chuck says is true, and first and foremost, if you're a play-by-play guy, radio is so much more fun. It's just a blast, and you are your own master on radio. You make the decisions on how to do it and why to do it. And one of the great things about radio and why, until they perfect the driverless car, we're still in business, is that there's always going to be somebody out there that needs your description, needs your listenership, whether they be a student who's across the country and can't afford, say, to buy the games on TV, or it's someone overseas, or someone working the night shift. There's always people that are going to be there that you have to service them. And in this regard, one of the things that, the ultimate compliment you can get as a play-by-play guy is someone to say, like, God, I felt like I was sitting right next to you. And that to me is the goal, to describe the scene so perfectly, and to the scene, the atmosphere, the colors, the sounds, all of that, to get all that into your broadcast so that the person feels like they're right next to you and they're experiencing what you're experiencing. And it's not something that you can roll out in bed to do. It takes work, and it takes some time to get to there. But I think that's the challenge, and that's the fun of it, is to drop in those little nuggets in your broadcast that can really flesh out that picture that you're trying to create. And to me, that's always been the great thing about radio and doing play-by-play on radio, is that I get to paint that picture every night.
Basketball is a little different. Baseball is probably the ideal radio sport, even in the age of the pitch clock, because there is time for those nuggets. In basketball, our time pretty much is limited to free throws. When they go to the line and they shoot two.
Oh, don't forget about replay. You have lots of time.
Oh, yes, very true, very true. But we are storytellers, and however that manifests itself, whether it be through interactions with players or coaches, or through statistical information, The one thing that I've really noticed in the video age, and especially in the modern video age, that it just bugs the hell out of me when I'm watching, especially an NBA game, is frankly the lack of information that's provided. Like, you know, if some guys hit 8 consecutive shots, I'd really like to know that he's hit 8 consecutive shots, and we don't see that very often. And I think we in radio do a much better job of telling you, you know, he's done that. He's got 21, and he's 6 for 16, and or whatever, you know, whatever a team is shooting in the quarter. I actually now find myself on a television broadcast that I'm not doing. You know, if I'm just sitting at home and watching the NBA Finals, that I have a second screen, that I use the NBA Courtside app and keep the split box there, so I actually know what's happening in the game, and then I, you know, listen to, you know, whatever those guys are saying. But I think, you know, the information aspect is really important here, and especially from a local standpoint, because I think your fans are expecting you to come up with different things pretty much every day. It's not hammering home the same point. I mean, there are storylines to every game, but I think you can see in certainly on the national telecasts, you know, they will go into a telecast with a specific storyline, and by God, they're going to hammer away at that storyline until the end of time. I think we're a bit more flexible in that regard, only to the extent that I think we can see a bigger picture, but at the same time, you know, we know who we're broadcasting to.
Do you feel like your access on a daily basis to your teams is still at the same level that it was 15 years ago? And how important is that access to you being able to bring that unique angle to your broadcast?
You know, I think well, first of all, I'm really lucky because we have Steve Kerr as our head coach, so I have plenty of access to anybody anytime I want. But yeah, the access is a little bit different, I think, and it differs from team to team. You know, I've worked with some coaches who have closed down practices and shoot-arounds, so you wait outside and then talk to some people after that. But, you know, Chuck and I are lucky in the sense where if we're not prepared for a game, it's our own fault, right? We have wads of information that are at our fingertips every day. One of the things I wanted to, and I see some younger broadcasters here today, is that when you're working at a level where you're not bombarded with a lot of information, you know, an email and a phone call can really go a long way. And not even about the team you're covering, maybe about the other team. You know, email or call that other coach, find out, hey, what's your big story this year? Who's your biggest surprise? How are you guys playing? You know, don't ask him for, you know, he's not going to give you his game plan, but just say, hey, what kind of a team are you guys? Are you a zone team, man to man, or are you in football? You know, what do you guys like to run? What ratio are you shooting for? Run pass every game, that kind of stuff, and just to kind of add a little bit more. Because say if I'm dialing by on the radio, and I'm kind of a geek, I will dial by and grab your broadcast once in a while. I want you to tell me something about your team that I don't know. I want to find out what's the storyline of this game and make me interested in this game and flesh it out. And sometimes all it takes is just that one little extra, you know, step of effort that can make your broadcast a lot better.
The access issue is an interesting issue because, I mean, clearly since COVID it's changed, and it probably should have gone back to pre-COVID by now, but because they saw what worked for them in COVID, certainly in our case in Dallas, we don't have nearly the access to the players that we used to. Now, Jason Kidd is fantastic. He's fantastic to me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times after I do a pregame interview with him that he just pats me on the shoulder and says, "You're not going anywhere yet. We have things we have to discuss." So, and then 15 minutes later, I'm done and I'm shaking my head at what I've just heard. It's like, and you know, and now a lot of that stuff is stuff that I can't say on the air, but it's stuff that certainly as I'm watching the game and trying to understand substitution patterns and why is a guy playing at this particular time or he's playing with whom at a particular time. You have a much better understanding of. But to Tim's point again, we're really lucky in the NBA. Certainly the 30 radio people. And I think Chris Denary from the Pacers is here this weekend too, and he's a winner. But I mean, there's so many. We look at it. Look, there are 8 billion people on Earth. There are 60 of us who do what we do. We know how lucky we are, and so we do lean on each other to try to put the best broadcast together. Because again, you are broadcasting, at least on the local level, you are broadcasting to your fan base. So you are certainly going to color it, toward your fan base. But you cannot ignore the other team. It's not the Washington Generals that are out there playing in an NBA game. I mean, these are real live NBA players, and they're really, really good. And you know what? I mean, the worst team is going to win basically about 20 games a year. All right. So some nights it's definitely going to happen, and you need to be prepared. You need to respect them. And so the work that you do, again, in finding that information, to be able to provide that information, and do that in a way that likely your television show might not even do that. I mean, because again, everybody's different. Everybody looks at their television broadcast, differently. It's always a 2.5-hour commercial for your team, but at the same time, it's a sporting event. It's competition. It's entertainment. It's all of those things. And there are some people in the league who take it to a tremendous extreme. And there are others, okay, I mean, I'll name names. We're here. We're among friends. I mean, you watch the Oklahoma City telecast, and they shall do no wrong. They shall do no wrong, period. And then you watch the Knicks broadcast, and it's an entirely different event. I mean, it's far more. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a neutral broadcast. But at the same time, my good friend Brad Sham, the voice of the Cowboys, would always tell me, you're going to do an objective broadcast from your team's point of view. And think about it, really. It's like you are going to call it as you see it, but obviously you know who your audience is. But you're not going to necessarily just ignore the fact that the other team might have just had an 80-yard run. The guy just cut back 6 different ways and made a fantastic run and had a touchdown, right? Or if Steph Curry goes for 57 against the Mavericks, which he did a couple of years ago, it's like I'm not going to ignore it, all right? It's happening, and how he's doing it, and the likely spectacular nature of how he's doing it is something that I'm going to get excited about. And I'll tell you what, there are Maverick fans who have texted me, emailed me and said, "Hey man, you're too excited about the Warriors." I said, "I can't help myself." I said, "I love basketball. I love NBA basketball, and damn it, I love watching Stephen Curry play." All right, so if he's going to do something that great, that deserves my attention, and frankly, it deserves yours.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember one year, and every market's a little bit different. I worked for the Kings, and I was telling the story last night where Houston Rockets came to town. Akeem goes for 30, 10, 5 blocks, 8, 7, whatever it was. And I had to go upstairs and do the post-game show. And Sacramento was still a pretty young NBA town at that point, so it was us against the world, according to the fan base. And this lady, we had a wireless mic working the crowd for the post-game show, and this lady asked a question. She said, "You made it sound like the Akeem Olajuwon show." And I looked down at the stat sheet. I said, "Ma'am, it was the Akeem Olajuwon show." And so every market's a little bit different. The Bay Area is much more. They want to know if Luka Doncic is playing well. With the possible exception, they really don't care too much for the Lakers, but the most nights, we can talk a lot about the other team, and I'm not going to get an email, where if I work in a different market, I might. So it really depends on what your market is. But again, to Chuck's point, I think you're doing your listeners a disservice if the other team are doing some fantastic things, whether it be a great goaltender in hockey, great defense in football, whatever it might be, great pitcher in baseball. You need to tell your audience that, because that's part of the story of the game. That's why we're at the point in the broadcast that we're at. So you need to let them know, what this story is, because if you don't do that, then you're doing your audience, I think, a real disservice.
We had last week in Dallas, Fort Worth, the Angels were in town, and Ohtani just decided that he was going to hit a 450-foot home run at every at-bat, seemingly. I mean, he hit 4 in the series, but it's like, how do you not thrill to that? How do you not just, even if it's not your team's guy doing that, you are watching the highest level of performance that you can possibly imagine. I mean, you're watching Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth 100 years later. I mean, whoever thought we'd see that? And I listened to our guys in Jared Sandler and Matt Hicks describe it. It's like, and they were like 10-year-old kids. And you know what? That's how we should all be acting. Like we're 10-year-old kids seeing something that we've never seen before, and being able to, translate that in a really understandable and yet truly exciting way that brings people back. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about, right? We're trying to keep people with us. And even though, I'd like to say that people just adore the sound of my voice and will hang on every word for 2.5 hours, I know they're not going to do that. No, they're not. Not even yours, Tim. Right? But if I do it well enough, long enough, and at the right time, they're going to come back the next day. And maybe they will stay with us a little bit longer. And that's always the goal.
One of the other things, too, that and I have to remind myself, we all kind of do this a little bit. We assume that everybody listening knows where we are, what we're doing, and what the situation is. And one thing that I'd like to hear from broadcasters when they start describing is the venue. Describe what the venue is. If I'm in Dallas, I tell them where we are in the building so that they get that perspective, what the color of the baseline is, what the color of the uniforms are. If it says Dallas across the front there night of Mavericks, or if it's Los Warriors on a special night, something like that, and even to talking a little bit about the building and what it looks like to you from your vantage point in the building, or from the press box at a baseball stadium. I think we all, doing baseball, we do the dimensions at the beginning of the broadcast. Well, maybe we should do them again in the middle of the broadcast. Remind people where you are and what the idiosyncrasies of that building are, or the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, are they shooting to your left?
Exactly.
Shooting to your right.
Yeah.
I try to do that out of every time out. Again, in a video age, you're watching the game, you don't have to worry about that. But coming out of a timeout, again, people are not with you all the time. So you just have to pick the right time to do that. I've always found that coming out of the timeout, first possession was probably the best way to do that. And uniforms usually probably at the beginning of each half. Just to sort of establish that. And of course in the NBA, now that we've screwed up the whole uniforms, where it used to be easy enough, where it was white at home and colors on the road, we don't, West Durham liking that in the back. Capitalist. Well, make my life easier, okay?
As we've seen stronger, faster, just more athletic individuals enter professional sports now than when you guys started your careers, how difficult is it to paint that perfect picture as the game is moving even quicker today than it did 15, 20 years ago?
Well, you gotta be locked in, to what you're doing. You can't be goofing around. You can't be, thinking about something else. You gotta be locked in what you're doing. And I was kind of lucky. The first thing I ever did was minor league hockey. And if you look down and doing hockey, you're dead. So you had to keep up with the pace. And to me, it's just a matter of making sure that you're not, stopping to tell a story when you shouldn't be telling a story, and to stay with it. You kind of put that story in the back and hold it for that replay or whatever it is, that gives you time to do that, because the game is very quick and it moves very fast. And so even say if you make the switch from college to pro, you're going to be surprised how fast the NBA game is. And to me, I've tried in the last couple of years because things are changing now. When I first got to the league, if a guy was 34, 35, he was on his last wheels. You know, he's going to be out of the league in a year or so. And now these guys are staying in shape. And I make a point of that, you know, that this guy is like 34 years old and he's not dropping in his production because of those techniques. That's a story in sports right now, is that they're learning how to take care of themselves and extending their careers. So yeah, there's a pace that you gotta stay with, but I think also you have to remind people why they're playing at that kind of a level.
Yeah, the pace between the college game and the NBA game is astonishing. It really is, and it even relates to how do you go to a break? How do you if the break? I remember, I think that the first NBA game I did, it's like some big play had happened and timeout is called, and I try to describe, what's happened and what it means, and I've just wasted like 20 seconds of the break, and you got to get to the break, and you got to understand that, as well as simply the fact that yes, there are more possessions, things are going to happen far more quickly, even if Luka's pounding it for 15 seconds and waiting for the right pick and roll move, but it's still gonna move faster than it does, in a college game where they're a lot of times hanging out, in the middle of the floor until there's about 10 seconds on the shot clock, and then they try to do something with it. But to Tim's point about the athletes, again, his guy is the best example of all. I mean, Steph Curry is 35 years old. I mean, there is nobody who runs the way he runs. It's nobody who is in constant movement the way he is in constant movement. So when he's doing all this whirling and, the Warriors' offense is really running and they're scoring 125 points and he's got a 40-point game, and I mean, that is a story. I mean, that's a huge part of the story because people can't stay with him. And it's harder for us to truly describe his particular motion until he has the ball, because our job is to stay with the ball. But in the aftermath of that, does this guy ever stop? It's one of the untold stories. Yeah, we know he's the greatest shooter that ever played, but why is he the greatest shooter that ever played? Because he's in the most incredible shape that maybe any NBA athlete has ever been, because nobody does what he does. And I mean, that is a story, that we can tell in the aftermath. It's harder for us to tell it, but it's certainly an important story for us to tell it. An important story for us to tell.
It is an important story. The other part about this too is just as we look at how sports is evolving, there's another issue with that. You kind of have to, if I tell people, unless you make the headlines, I'm not going to talk about what you do off the court. But today that's harder to do because everybody's got a platform, everybody's got the social media channel. Everybody's got a podcast. We have a player, or we used to have a player that had a podcast that it creates a lot of news. And so, every now and then, you have to address that too. And even though it seems kind of silly, but that's the way it is right now. But, getting back to, broadcasting and pace and everything else is that, I think one of the things that we try to do on our broadcast all the time is not only, keep up with the pace, but also, just remind people that, like Chuck said, you're 10 years old. If you're having fun on the air, I think that translates to your listener. They're going to stay with that broadcast because they're going to think, hey, this is fun. This sounds like fun. And so there's nothing worse than hearing a broadcaster sound like he's being, taken off to, with chains to do the game, because, it just doesn't sound like he's having he or she is having a good time. And
well,
so,
the listener will know it.
Yeah.
The listener will obviously know, and they'll obviously tune out and can't have that. That's absolutely unacceptable. And frankly, I do hear, and it's almost, and video, I think, is part of this, that because the video is there, the play-by-play guy does not want to over-emote. He really doesn't want to talk very much. And so he does give off an almost too cool for school vibe. And I realize that there are a lot more, kids in college or whatever who are looking at the video angle as opposed to the radio angle. But, I think all of us who do radio will say this without equivocation that, if you can do radio, you can do TV. It's easier to cut back. If you do TV first and then try to come back to radio and think that style is going to work, that's not going to work. So the ability to describe is really important. The ability to describe with emotion is really good, and that I think carries you regardless of which medium you're referring to. But again, it's a lot easier to cut back than it is to add on.
Yeah, and then part of the way that I think you add on, I got a tape from a kid a while back who was first year minor league baseball. He's really young, so I was trying to help him out a little bit, and he had the right names in the right places. But as I told him, I said, "You're describing, it's ball one, strike two, whatever." I said, "What kind of pitch was it? Where's his foot on the rubber? Where, what kind of is his hat straight on? Is he 6'5"? Is he 5'11"? What, is he a right-hander, left-hander?" I wasn't getting any of that, and so that, that's a way to flesh it out. Give me those little details. Tell me something about, player in a game that I have no stake in. If I'm hearing a small college game and I don't know anybody, I don't know the coaches, I only know the names of the schools. Tell me something about, what's happening in your game to keep me there. And I think that to me is something, when you talk about description on radio, if you can get to that level where you've got all those little details, which way the wind is blowing in a baseball game. Is it going out to left center field? Is it coming in from right center field? Tell me all those things so I know what's happening in front of you. And if you can do that, and again, like Chuck said, I've done play-by-play on radio and TV, and TV was so much easier. Radio, I get done with an NBA game on radio, especially a fast-paced one. It's give me a beer and get me a nap because I'm done for the day. TV, I could come out, I could play 18 holes of golf after doing a TV game because I didn't have that same energy there because it's different a little bit on TV. You can switch from one. I'm not degrading TV. I'm just saying that in terms of a broadcaster, if you can master radio, you can easily master TV. It's just the TV is more mechanical in terms of learning the mechanics of it, and then on how to describe your stuff in a short, concise form, because you don't have to say what color uniform they're wearing because the viewer can see that. And it's much easier to pare back that way than it is to go the other way because it's harder. Radio is instinctively harder to paint the picture.
And even to that extent too, and we haven't even gotten, we've talked all around, your foot's on the rubber, ball's on the left side of the floor, ball's on the logo, on the left block, that type of thing. Score and time. Score and time. I mean, again, people are not with you all the way through. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be every basket. I mean, there are a lot of people that can, because the game going back and forth may just dictate that you can't do that. I mean, a lot of people have always used the old hourglass technique, every 90 seconds or so. But, you've got to have it in your head to do that. I think sometimes if you give it after every basket, it's annoying. I think scoring time after every basket, it's like, if you come down, there are 4 consecutive baskets and you've given, the score 4 times in 30 seconds. Okay, that's annoying. I mean, you got to have a little bit of moderation in your head. But again, people aren't with you all that long. People maybe have just popped on. I mean, they pretty much should know within, I'd say, 60 seconds of them tuning in, what the score is, how much time's left, and then any other part of that game that you want to tell them about.
Tim, I wanted to hear from you. You went back to school this past year and did Stanford football. So how different was calling professional NBA basketball and then going back to college and doing Stanford football and pacing and athlete level and whatnot? What kind of differences were there for you?
Well, it was first of all, it was fun. I used to fill in for Stanford a lot on football because they always hired people that couldn't do their whole games. And last year I couldn't do all their games because of my Warrior schedule. But the pace in college football is a lot different. You know, you've got time in between each play. And the other point, which we really haven't got to, Chuck's alluded to it a couple times, is that your audience is not with you all the time. So I always thought a good thing with the college football broadcast coming out of a break, do it maybe once a quarter, maybe once every 2 or 3 breaks, reset the entire game. Here's why we're at 14-7. Here's why it's 21-10. This happened. Stanford's only gotten 1 first down, which we did a lot of that last year. The other part about it was that unfortunately for someone jumping into that broadcast because I was hired at the last second, they had a change at the last second. And say you're playing up in UW in Washington, which is a terrific venue, by the way. If you ever get near there for a college football game, go. It's outstanding. But the special teams play, tackle by 19. There's no name on the back. Now, is that the 19 on defense or is it 19 on offense? And so that the double number thing drives me nuts. But the other one that drives me nuts, a goal line situation, 65 is now 93. What? It's like, yeah. So it's you have to be really on top of that stuff, or have a spotter with you that's really really good, because that stuff, that to me was one. And also, certain places now decide that radio needs to be close to the end zone, which is not always a lot of fun. But actually, I had a lot of fun doing it. It was nice to, in NBA games, I might have 10 notes that I really want to get in, and I might get to 5 or 6 because of the pace of the game. And doing a college football game is great because most of my notes, depending on how the game went, I get most of the stories and notes we wanted to get to.
So, asking for those in the room that are working college games that might not have a spotter, right? A lot of folks, younger folks in this room, might not have the budget in their college games to have a spotter. What tips or tricks would you recommend to try and differentiate between those double numbers, or how do you handle those situations?
I would, if you have double numbers and I would definitely call the other SID and find out, this one guy.
Hopefully the SID's coming to your booth before the game. And he's telling you that.
That's hopefully, yeah. There are certain PR people in the NBA, I couldn't pick them out of a lineup, but because they never come to radio anymore because we're off the floor. But I would try to find out do they wear their hair differently, and does one guy use maybe he's got a bandana or something, one guy, or does he have a sleeve on his arm or something like that, to try to separate those two. And if you can, depending on what level you're at, watch some film. I was lucky last year. I have a relationship with the Stanford's film coordinator, and so he gave me access to their library. So every time I was on a plane in between a Warrior game, I was watching my next opponent's Stanford stuff 2 or 3 games, and that helped him immeasurably, because then I got to see different players and, okay, that's so-and-so. And the other thing, when they warm up too, don't just hang out during warm-ups. Pay attention. Watch who the guys are. What they again, what they're doing. Who looks good. Is the punter punting well? That kind of a thing. That can help you in a broadcast. If he misfires one, you could say, well, you know what, he wasn't hitting him well in warm-ups. That kind of thing. So yeah, I think those are all little things you can do. Yeah, anybody got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
You.
Yep.
The guy next to me, and the sounds of the crowds, and I know with basketball there may not be as many.
You want us to smell the popcorn from the guy in front of us?
Hey.
Sort of the vibe of the crowd, or any of those.
Well, obviously, to me, it's a game-to-game thing. It's like the quality of the game, oftentimes, will determine is there a real buzz in the, again, like if Luka goes off and has one of his 25-point first quarters, the buzz is just absurd. But, there might be, it might be a game that's just dead, and both teams are shooting under 40%, right? And it's like there are turnovers all over the place. You say this is a rock fight. This is a grind. This is and the crowd isn't the crowd. You're saying that you have to give the crowd a reason to get into the game, and so yeah, it's basketball. Indoor sports, generally speaking, whether it's basketball or hockey, it's far different than baseball, and plus baseball, even with the quicker pace now, still allows you the luxury of being able to sort of work that stuff in.
And some visual things. I used to do TV for the Sacramento River Cats AAA team when they first moved there, and there's a bridge you can see off the left center field fence, but that bridge will rise up when a tall ship comes by. Little things like that. Oh, the bridge is coming up tonight, so that kind of thing. And we don't get too many smells or anything in NBA arenas. Well, Oracle had some smells, but that's a whole other story. There were some people really enjoying basketball at that old arena, but but again, the sights, to describe what's going on in the building,
if you see a fight, I did a playoff game with the Mavericks and Nuggets back in 2009, and that actually when I was still close to the floor, and that was the time where Carmelo's I don't know if he was married yet, but she was getting into it with fans, and there was some throwing down going on. It was absolutely insane. It's 2 rows behind me, and I'm trying to keep my eye on the floor, but something's going on behind you, so that type of thing you definitely need to keep tabs on.
One thing we've done on our broadcast just for fun is we do like a little jersey watch. Oh, we saw this kind of jersey. There's a Baron Davis, the capper of all time happened this year. There were 2 people sitting down, and we had this player. He was only with us a few months, and during the pandemic, and the 2 people were sitting down, one with a home jersey, one with a road jersey of Amari Spellman. That was
oh my goodness.
that was the winner for the year.
Hardcore. Seriously hardcore.
You can do things like that. If you're doing a minor league baseball game, we got a guy with a San Francisco Giants jersey over here, we got an A's jersey over there, Rockies jersey, that kind of stuff, just to kind of give people what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Doing high school games for many years and pencil and paper for statistics during games. This past year I started doing the NAIAs for football, and all of a sudden have access to live stats. How do you balance giving the listener too much compared to too little, not just throwing out random numbers nonstop?
Try to find. I tell if I have a stat person, and I do and I don't, depending on what arena I'm at, but try to find the numbers that tell the story. What's happening in the game? If say we had a game 7 with Sacramento this year, there were 2 big storylines. Steph Curry was going crazy, and Kevon Looney they couldn't keep him off the offensive glass. Those were the 2 numbers that we came back to time and time again, were offensive rebounding and Curry scoring. And so I try to find the numbers that tell the story. And not just, this team's 5 for 15 from 3-point line. Why are we at the point are we at in the broadcast? Would it be in football? Is it because Stanford can't stop the run, or is it whatever that storyline may be?
And to add on to the individual number, it's the team number. If you have a team that's got 15 offensive rebounds and they got 28 second chance points, that's a pretty important number to give. If you're a team like the Mavericks who don't turn it over very much, and then proceed to have a game where they're turning it over 17 times, that's a story. A lot of it even has to do with your prep. With the if you see something like that and you see something out of the ordinary, well, by nature that's news. And so that's a story I think that you want to tell. Yeah.
Kind of go back to what you were talking about with trying to weave in personal stories of players and things like that. It's really hard to do in basketball, as you pointed out. After the
How much time do you, if
Yeah.
on the free throw line, you basically have about 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Find out what story you can tell in 45 seconds. And again, to the notion of forcing the story, look, the game is going to determine what stories you ultimately tell. Again, hopefully every game is so good that you don't have to go into the deep dive. That basically, you use maybe 70% of that kind of real background stuff. I mean, but hopefully the game is so good that the game just carries the day, and because ultimately, fans are tuning. Did the Mavericks win tonight? Are they losing it? What's going on with that? And the other stuff again is the color that just sort of fills in the blanks.
Well, this is just me because when I got to the NBA in 1989, I went from 1989 to 2006 and did not do a playoff game. I did not have a team that got to 500 in that stretch. So what I learned there was I got to prepare every night like it's going to be a blowout. Like, it's not going to matter if I describe a layup to the tee in the fourth quarter if I can weave in a good story. I mean, I got to keep people, energized and attached to the broadcast, and that's where, that kind of prep comes into play. So I would say that I wouldn't, go totally down the rabbit hole on that one, but I would have it in my back pocket just in case, because you never know. We've all done games where there's been a stupid delay. I mean, I did a game in Seattle one night, the scoreboard caught on fire. And we had like a 10-minute, delay while this guy's over the
Or you can
extinguisher.
you can have a guy hanging on a rim and bend the rim and have a 45-minute
Yeah,
rain delay
exactly.
like we had this last. But also to your point too. Now there are certain events that might require the really super deep dive. Now, like for me, it was the night that Dirk went for past 30,000 points. So, at that point, there's all kinds of stuff that you're bringing up, and all the historical stuff, both on a macro, NBA level, and just reliving Dirk's career, to that point, that then come into play that you want to bring out, because there is it's the moment. It's absolutely the moment. And as it turned out, when he did that, he happened to score 18 points in the first quarter, and the 30,000th point came on his 20th point, and we all knew he had to do it that night. It was the end of a homestand. He had brought a whole bunch of people in from Germany to try to celebrate with him, and like the last couple of prior games, he had not shot the ball very well. And we're thinking, God, he's not scoring 20 tonight. This is not going to happen. And then he blows up for 18, and the building's going nuts. And to your point, again, what are you feeling? How are you emoting it? So, I mean, all of that comes into play. So, don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to go down the deep hole. But at the same time, sort of understand your moment, and if that moment actually requires you doing that. Right. No, as I say, if there's 4 consecutive baskets scored within a 45-second span or whatever, and the game's blasting back and forth, I mean, I think it's really hard to do it after every possession. And I think at that point it's like it gets, repetitive's not the right word, but it almost seems like it's over the top. But there is, like I said, I think you kind of have to do it in your head, but if you pretty much know that within 45 seconds to a minute, you should be given the score in time.
Maybe a way you can attack that is giving the score without actually giving the score. Well, that pushes their lead to 9. and then maybe a possession later, then you get the score again, or now it's in double digits. Now they're down by double digits. So things like that, where you're not actually giving the score, but you're giving, people understand where the game's at. So that might be something you could do.
I want to ask about scripting. I know a lot of guys approach it differently. Adrian Healy, he does the MLS stuff, British guy. He has a booklet where if there's a goal or whatever, there's a special moment. He has it scripted out, written exactly.
Never, 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 ever.
The only thing I script is sometimes in the pregame show, because we use, out of necessity, for years I worked without a color guy, so I've always used audio on my broadcast, sound bites from coaches and players, which is actually, if you're working alone, that's actually something that you can really use to your advantage. But so that's the only time I use a script, maybe in the pregame show, because I want to get that right and make it nice and tight.
But a magic moment, I mean, you can have an idea in your head. Again, I'll go back to when the Mavericks won the NBA championship, and my thought process was, what's the hardest thing in the world to do? Hardest thing in the world to do is to climb Mount Everest. So when they won, I said, well, the Mavericks have scaled the NBA playoff mountain and have planted their flag. But I mean, that came organically as a result of a thought. Not an Adrian Healy thing, not a Jim Nantz thing, and Jim's phenomenal and all that. But it's scripted and it sounds scripted, and everything in those moments should be emoted out of emotion, out of pure emotion and joy, or sorrow given your circumstance.
Chuck, you kind of talked about redundancy. I was wondering, especially in the NBA game, sometimes there's early motion offense that totally might be necessary for players setting something up. Are you describing every single pass in an NBA game, or how do you move from maybe telling a story to shot clock's winding down?
I'm trying to describe as many as I can. With the Warriors, actually, it's harder than anybody else because nobody passes more than the ball leaves someone's hands and goes someplace else more than anywhere else. But I'm trying to describe as many passes, but even more importantly, where's the ball? Where is is it at the right elbow? Is it at the right wing? Is it beyond the arc of the right wing? Is it in the right corner? Wherever. I mean, to me, that's probably even a little more important than every individual pass, until obviously the last one, skip it over the top, left corner three.
Don't be afraid to say what kind of a pass it is.
Yeah.
Bounce pass, off the dribble pass,
Dribble handoff.
chest pass. Yeah, that's one thing. That's a little detail. Again, it brings that picture up just a little bit. Mr. Holman, you have a question? No. Okay.
How do you handle, as you said, your objective for the home team, let's say sticking it up? How do you handle it when that being too negative with the home?
I'm just lucky some of our VPs don't listen to the radio. So, again, in the Bay Area, I get a little more leeway than the other markets because if the Warriors are sticking things up, people don't want me to sugarcoat that. But yeah, there's a definite line. There's a line you got to draw. There are different ways of doing that. I'm pretty sure that's not what they wanted to do there. That kind of thing. So, so yeah, there is a line. But again, you got to be honest too.
I may be a little more blunt at times, but you can't make it personal. Okay, back in the day when Antoine Walker played for the Mavericks, I hated Antoine Walker. I hated his game, but I wasn't actually doing the games at the time. I was doing our pre and post, and he had one of his typical games, like 55 games in the year, where he went 3 for 17 and had 4 turnovers and was absolutely miserable. And they never should have acquired him to begin with. And I'd been pretty much harping on that all year in the pre and post. But I can't do that as a play-by-play guy. You just can't do that. It's your job to describe that Antoine Walker is 3 of 17 and leave it at that.
When I was in the CBA and when I was a teenager, the old Continental Basketball Association, for those who don't know, it preceded the D League and the G League. And the joke among one of our announcers was the GM position in those leagues usually isn't a player personnel thing. It's more of a running the office type thing. And so, but one of the broadcasters got promoted to GM as well during the season. We thought, oh, wouldn't that be great to do that broadcast? You know, the guy makes it terrible. Don't worry about that, folks. He'll be gone tomorrow. You know.
How much more difficult is that when you're working solo and you have to provide a little bit of color to what you do?
Yeah, that actually I don't mind working solo on an NBA game in part because of the pace and everything. But yeah, you had to be color. I used a lot of sound because I always thought and still think that if I'm translating what the head coach, in this case now Steve Kerr, wants to do or what he's emphasizing these days in practice, I think it's much more interesting to the listener. It gives them a different voice to hear, and who better to say it than Steve himself than me. So I used a lot of sound and learned how to describe a little bit of the action as to what was happening and why it was happening.
Also, in fairness, the Warriors radio crew and the staffing of it is absolutely at the top of the league. And they truly care about their radio broadcasts. There are a lot of teams in the NBA that don't and won't put the emphasis and won't put the time into it to allow for something like that to occur. But in a absolutely perfect world, and Tim has that, it's absolutely phenomenal to be able to use that.
Yeah, we have really good people on our broadcast. I'm really lucky.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time this morning. Congratulations on your awards, and thank you for sharing with everybody here in the room.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.